This morning in Baltimore, new protest planned today in the case of Freddie Gray. Outrage growing as police investigate how Gray died following injuries suffered in police custody. Autopsy reports show he had severe spinal cord injuries. 6 officers have now been suspended, and we're expecting to learn more about them today. CNN's Miguel Marquez has more.
Witnesses say from the very beginning, Freddie Gray asked for medical attention.
They flipped him over and they put both knees on his back and held him there till the cruiser came to pick him up. He was hollering that the handcuffs was too tight. He was hollering, the handcuffs too tight, handcuffs too tight. I got asthma.
Today, Baltimore police said 6 of its officers are suspended with pay after 25-year-old Freddie Gray fell into a coma and never recovered, dying Sunday, 7 days after being arrested by police.
There was no physical bodily injury that we saw, nor was it evident in the autopsy of Mr. Gray. None of his limbs were broken. He did suffer a very tragic injury to his spinal cord, which resulted in his death.
Cell phone video captured by a witness just after his arrest shows Gray's limp body being carried by police as he shouts in pain. Witnesses say what happened before the cell phone started recording amounted to abuse. His family lawyer says his spine was nearly severed.
He put his hands out like this. The officer walked straight to him, hit him in his mouth, slanted him on his head, put the cuffs on him.
But police disagree, saying Gray was arrested without force or incident. He has a history of prior drug arrests and lived in one of West Baltimore's toughest neighborhoods. The family lawyer says Gray got coffee that Sunday morning, saw police officers he feared, and ran.
As soon as he saw police, he took off running, zigzagging through the alleyways there, came down that alleyway, across this little green patch here, and then across this street and down this little alleyway here. Police say it took all of 2 minutes from when they first saw him to the time that they arrested him, which is hard to believe because it is several blocks away.
The Gray family lawyer contests information police have so far put out, saying it is critical to know when Freddie Gray was seriously injured and how long it took to actually get him help.
This, where witnesses say where he was first taken by police. Other witnesses told his attorney he was dragged then about 20 feet up the sidewalk here. This is the Bruce Court housing project in Baltimore. He was dragged to this area, and that part where you see the video, that's where this was taken here.
One of many police surveillance cameras on this block. Baltimore police say only one picked up a tiny bit of the incident, and it didn't show any of their officers doing anything wrong. The Baltimore police initially said Gray was arrested for carrying a knife. Today, Baltimore's mayor went out of her way to make clear that carrying a knife is not grounds for arrest. Miguel Marquez, CNN, Baltimore, Maryland.
All right, so why is it so hard to figure out how a man's spine was nearly severed? Shouldn't it be obvious? Well, let's talk about that with Jonathan Gilliam, a former Navy SEAL and police officer. You also worked for the FBI. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.
So the mayor said something must have happened inside that police van. So I'm just wondering, I mean, initially Mr. Gray was handcuffed, right? And he was thrown into the back of that police paddy wagon, in essence, right? And they were going to take him to the station. Are there police officers in the back with them? Because doesn't it usually work where the police officers are in the cab and the prisoner is in the back?
Well, I don't know if there's any set, federal standard for the way that law enforcement has to treat somebody when they're in the back of the van as far as putting another officer in there. I think that goes department to department and how their standards are and how they work it. I don't know if there was somebody back there. It appears as though there was not.
At some point, they hear Mr. Gray in the back and he's causing a ruckus, and they put leg irons on him. They go back, they put leg irons, and then I assume they put him back inside the van. At that point, wouldn't they notice there was something terribly wrong if he suffered a spinal cord injury earlier?
Well, it seems as though, at the point where he was, that we're seeing here, where he was being picked up and carried to the van, he already was having some issues of spinal cord injury. And
you think so?
Well, the way his leg, I'm no doctor, but if somebody is complaining about that they have certain pains and then they can't move their legs, I would take it seriously. I don't know if that's a typical thing for criminals.
It seems like he's standing on one leg.
Right.
But, we talked earlier about him saying, I have asthma, and police ignored that. And you're saying that's expected because it's often prisoners will yell they have some malady when they don't.
And I think that really is the problem here is that officers see this stuff day in and day out for 8, 12 hours depending on their shift. I think what the real problem that we're seeing is a lack of training in the standards, and standards being set and then either enforced or followed. But if you don't tell an officer this is the way you'll react, then an officer has to interpret how he's going to react, he or she. And when that interpretation is left up to the officer, you may have certain injuries because they're not doctors that they ignore. And I think that is a problem that we're seeing beyond brutality. I don't think this necessarily, from what I saw here, was brutality. What I see is a lack of standards telling them when somebody says they have a certain injury that you have to treat it a certain way.
So let's examine more what you're saying. So the suspect ran away and police chased him, they tackled him to the ground and they cuffed him. So what should they have done at that point? Should they have left him lying there until they figured out whether he had asthma or not?
Well, it's interesting because this happens so much on a daily basis in some of these arrests, and cops face this on a daily basis. But you have to be able to take it seriously and look at it. And a lot of the times when somebody's screaming, "I have asthma," the fact that they're screaming, "I have asthma," tells you that they're okay. But he wasn't saying just that I have asthma. His legs weren't moving properly. Had he taken a fall, there was something unusual that I saw there. But perhaps the officers that were on the scene didn't see that. But I think standards need to be set where they react a certain way when medical things are involved. If somebody says they have asthma, the department should have certain standards that they ask questions, they monitor to see if it's a certain thing that's happening, and then they respond to that in a standard fashion. If you don't have the standards, you can't measure the appropriate behavior of a law enforcement officer.
Well, 6 officers have now been suspended. I guess we'll just have to see what happens as the investigation continues.
Body
Jonathan.
cameras are going to start playing a bigger and bigger part of this.
Okay, a lot of people agree with you. Thank you so much, Jonathan Gilliam.